Hello. Dutch heritage, like any other heritage, has iconic symbols that we all associate with a certain people or a certain country. Those iconic symbols are often types of food, styles of dress, familiar songs, famous people. The Dutch are no different. Identifiable images from the Netherlands, or otherwise called Holland, include bicycles, great cheese like Gouda, Delft pottery, famous painters like Rembrandt and Van Gogh. This speech will focus on arguably the most well-known of those Dutch images: tulips, wooden shoes, and windmills. Tulips were brought to Europe in the mid-1500s from the Ottoman Empire. Think Iran, Persia, whatever it was called at that time. They became a status symbol for the Dutch elite. The wealthy would compete amongst themselves to possess the rarest of these bulbs. HollandHistory.net talks about what started as a hobby quickly became much more. So in the early 1600s, they started trading them. By the mid-1630s, the tulip bulb was on the stock exchange, and Investopedia says that the Dutch society, not necessarily the Dutch elite anymore, but the entire Dutch society, wanted to trade in these bulbs, and it became kind of a mania. They would trade their possessions to become owners of tulip bulbs. A single flower in the mid-1630s was trading for as much as a skilled worker made in an entire year. So if you look at what a plumber or an electrician makes today, that's how much they were spending on a single bulb. Investopedia also talks about the bubble that was created. And a bubble is exactly what happened in the late 2000s with the housing market. You had really extremely inflated prices for something that just wasn't worth that much. Well, this is the same effect that happened. This is the first identified bubble. It happened in 1637, and when that asset, that tulip, became separated from its intrinsic value, then you have a bubble. And the bulbs themselves had a little bit of a disease from an insect, and panic set in when the value of the bulbs were realized to be not as much as what people were selling it for. And so in that panic, everybody started to sell, and of course the demand went way down, and of course the price went way down as well. So people lost everything they had. Tulip sales today remain a strong business in Holland. Over 250,000 jobs are created worldwide from the tulip industry alone. Holland Trade and Investment talks about Royal Flora Holland auctions, and they sell 20 million plants a day in their 4 sites around the country. That is quite a logistical feat, because that number is very high. Wooden shoes. The oldest known wooden shoes dates to the 13th century. So those wooden shoes were worn about 800 years ago, and probably longer. Dutch wooden shoes says that they were probably worn throughout Europe at that time, because really only the wealthy could afford shoes. The people in the country that farmed and whatever did not have money for leather unless they made them themselves. And what's particularly noted is that the Dutch countryside is very wet, and so the wooden shoes protected against the wet, and so that's why wooden shoes are mostly associated with Holland in the Netherlands. They were an economic necessity they started to lose their desire in the late 1800s, but then saw a resurgence during World War I and World War II because there was no leather to be had during the war, and so people started using wooden shoes again because wood was plentiful. Today, those same wooden shoes are mostly just a tourist attraction, souvenir. You can get them painted in any kind of shape and design and whatever, but to stay true to the original, the unpainted variety is the one to seek. Windmills or water mills. The oldest windmill is over 1,000 years old, and originally it was to drive or pump the water off the land. The Netherlands has always been one to try to create more land by removing the water, and then the windmills were a huge part of that effort. There was dikes and fortifications that the Dutch built, but the windmill is the symbol, according to Holland.com, of the Dutch's struggle with water. Currently, Holland has over 1,000 windmills operating. Some of them are still pumping water, but a lot of them are used to grind grain, and they're also used as tourist attractions. Those tourist attractions you can visit. Some of them you can even stay in. They're very iconic Dutch image. Every year in Holland, Michigan, at the beginning of May, is a Tulip Time Festival. Visitors come from across the nation and other countries as well to see the entire city decked out in tulips. During the 10 days of the festivities, there are several parades where you can see Dutch dancing by large groups of people, taste some Dutch food treats like stroopwafels and bitterballen. And while Holland does not boast the number of windmills of the homeland, they do have a few that you can visit and enjoy.